This morning's topic is addiction is the solution, not the problem. We'll find a solution together. My name is Ashley, for those who are new to the channel, and I am an addictions therapist. I also am a counsellor and I specialise in childhood and trauma. I have studied addiction and counselling and mental health right the way up to PhD, and I've also overcame addiction. I think that's the most important thing that qualifies us to be talking. And I also know what it's like to have loved ones who struggle with addiction, so I understand it from a full 360-degree view, unfortunately. So tonight's topic is addiction is the solution, not the problem. And this is something that I say all the time, but I actually watched a podcast. The person who was on its name's completely escaped us. But he was talking about exactly the same words. He said addiction is a solution, and he said what the problem is when we remove the addiction, then we're just left with our minds, emotions, which are hard to deal with, and we end up becoming really destructive. So that was his words, and I fully agree that that's where that kind of mantra comes from, because I think if we view it as a solution, not the problem, then what we need to think about is getting a better solution, something that's going to be less destructive than the solution of the addiction, but is also going to help you manage the problem, what's going on underneath. So what might that look like? Well, one of the best things that we can do, I talk about emotional regulation on this channel all the time, because it really is helpful for addiction recovery, because when we have a craving, it's huge emotions, but equally we're going to be experiencing a lot of emotions that we've been pushing down and numbing out with the addiction and escaping from. So a way that we can do that in therapy, what I would be getting clients to do is, first of all, learn that an emotion is a chemical response going on in our brains and bodies. So this response with zero thought lasts between 60 and 90 seconds. So if when you're having an emotion, you just take a deep breath, breathing out longer than you're breathing in, and just commit to, I'm not going to think about the emotion, but I'm just going to witness it. So where does it feel in my body? And just feel the emotion, and it's going to feel uncomfortable. But actually what you're starting to train your brain to realize is, yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's not as uncomfortable as I thought, especially if you're not attaching thoughts, and it doesn't last as long as I thought. So we'll have a feeling of anger or frustration or jealousy, rejection. Just sit there, breathe, say, I am feeling rejected, I'm feeling upset, and that is it. And notice where is it in your body. And when you come to the end of it, just take a breath and be like, okay, I got through it. That wasn't as bad as I thought, because by reflecting on that, you were telling your brain that actually an emotion isn't this really horrible thing, because we've been numbing it out with drugs or alcohol for such a long time that actually we're quite nervous about these emotions. So that's the first thing that we can do. And just by practicing this without putting thought onto it, allows us to just get used to calming it down. So when we deal with cravings, it's more manageable. Another thing that we can do with emotions, I know I've said don't think, feel the emotions. That can be a bit overwhelming. Maybe want to think about it. Is say, okay, I'm going to practice feeling the emotion, but I'm going to set some time aside, maybe tonight or tomorrow, where I'm going to slot out a half an hour time frame to think about whatever made us feel that way. So you can, and literally set a timer, so you're giving yourself time and space to think about it. So that's the first thing. I'm going to go through and answer some questions, and then I'm going to come back to some other ways that we can get a better solution to numbing ourselves out with addiction. Do I do something materially productive? This is a bunch of stupid nonsense. Yeah, look, this is just something that I'm talking about. I'm a therapist, and I'm just trying to give off different tips and tricks in each life from a psychological standpoint, and from a therapeutic standpoint, and a neurological standpoint is the aim of the game. So yeah, let's see what other people are saying. Hi Scarfili or Lee, how are you doing? I'm all right, thank you. So if anyone's got any questions around addiction and mental health, do let us know. I'm a therapist and I'm happy to answer them. So what I will say is, going back to this point of addiction is a solution, not a problem. Let's come up with a better solution together. So the first thing I've said is around emotions, learning to manage emotions, because that is one of the biggest kickers. When you remove the addiction, at some point, you're going to have to start dealing with these emotions and they're going to feel alien and they're going to feel uncomfortable. So learning to get comfortable with the emotion, but the key is not thinking of it. So that's number one. Number two is to recognize if we're thinking of addiction as a solution and looking at, okay, what is it a problem to? So I talk about this on the channel quite often, but one place to start, if you're not really sure why you have the addiction, is to look at ACEs. You can do an ACEs test, ACE little s, and it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And what they've found is, although it's not a guarantee that people with a high scoring ACEs test is going to have addiction, what you find is that you're between 40 and 70% more likely to have an addiction if you're scoring 4 or more ACEs. So that's a huge percentage. So that'll give you a little roadmap to, okay, maybe this is why I've got the addiction. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go and delve into this stuff, because it can actually worsen the addiction if we start dealing with trauma straight off the bat of coming out of addiction. But the reason why it's good to understand why we have the addiction is it means that we can sit there and say, okay, maybe this isn't my fault. Maybe this is a solution after all. Maybe I'm not morally failing at something. I'm not a bad person for having addiction, but actually it's a solution to all this stuff that's went on. So anyone can do an ACEs test. You just type it into Google and it is free of charge. And it's what a lot of researchers and therapists use. So that can be a good starting point as well. I'll see what else other people are saying, and I'll keep going back to different ways that we can come up with a better solution, because that's what the channel's about. It's about finding an alternative solution to addiction and to essentially stop shaming ourselves for having the addiction in the first place. But I'll see what other people are saying. Anon Dude is saying, yeah, what I do about my addictions and mental health. What do you mean about that? So Khalil saying, what do you recommend for technology detox? Yeah, look, we can just be as addicted to social media technology. It is something where brains are getting flooded with dopamine, especially if we're watching like little shorts. So watching things like high speed, you get little dopamine hits from it. So what I would say is to try and get some control over it first of all. So if you're struggling with social media, first of all, I would try and give yourself a window, like I'm only going to do it at this time. So for me, it's like I only do it when I put my son to bed. I've got to admit, Christmas holidays, it's went apart. But I only do it when I put my son to bed, because I've got to sit in his room for an hour. So I give myself an hour time slot. The other thing is with addiction, we can't just fully get rid of it. We need to replace it with something. So what I found really helpful is to replace it with something inspiring and productive. So that could be anything. So for me, I just do an hour dancing on the night time. I also watch podcasts. So I switch it up for something where I'm going to be learning and motivating myself. So it's about switching it over, I would say, would be helpful. And third of all, looking at why is this more appealing? Why is my head stuck in my phone watching something that's not really bringing us that much joy more appealing than what I've got going on in my own life? Maybe you're lonely, maybe your relationships aren't that fulfilled, and maybe we can go and work on how to make our relationships more fulfilling. So yeah, that would be what I'd say. Kayla saying, I'm addicted to being lazy. I don't think that's an addiction, being addicted to being lazy, but I would certainly say there's probably reasons why you feel lazy, and maybe it's just the way you're talking to yourself. So maybe that's negative self-talk, because I thought I was being lazy, And then I realised, well, actually, when I broke down what I'm doing in my day, I'm not really being lazy. I'm just like telling myself I'm being lazy. So a good place to start is to break down your day. If you find, okay, I'm not doing as much as I'd like to do, look at what are the reasons. There's always a reason for a behaviour. It doesn't just come out of a vacuum. So maybe you're struggling with depression. Maybe you're just not appeased by life. Maybe life's just really boring. And so I'd rather just, I've got no like joy and spark in it. So what can I do to get that joy and spark in my life? Hi, Tico. Yeah, as Tico said, if anyone wants any one-to-one or personal support, reach out to me at schoolofaddiction.co.uk, and it's totally free, guys. Yeah. No, NA isn't shame-based. Losers in it shame people, but that doesn't reflect the program. People who shame get sorted out eventually. Yeah, so NA is, I think, it's a bit of a controversial topic on my channel, and I'm not faith-based, but what I will say about groups, what you can get from groups which you can't get from being, say for instance you've got an alcohol addiction and all your friends drink alcohol, or you've got more likely a drug addiction and all your friends are drug addicts. That's really demoralizing, because the only people you're surrounding yourself with are people who are also struggling. And then you start to believe, oh, this is all I'm ever going to be able to do. Like, this is all we ever do. Whereas going to things like smart AA meetings, NA meetings, you get to see people who are inspiring. And there's actually some practical tools you could do to get yourself out of it, which can be motivating when you're feeling lost. If you don't want to go to AA or NA, there's something called SMART meetings. And SMART meetings are a similar concept, but they're grounded in counselling and therapeutic theory. So it's a different approach, but it's got the same thing. You're going to have people who are all in the same boat. So it's camaraderie, which is hopefully going to help you like break down shame. I'm not the only person going through this, because addiction can feel isolating, but it's the same benefits of group camaraderie. Somebody's saying, I've done the steps, got a lot out of it, identified a lot of problems, helped a lot, but I'm not about NA now. Yeah, and look, sometimes it's just about accepting that we need group support, or we need that additional support. The thing with addiction is you just feel stuck. And you feel stuck, and then you quietly start to accept your fate, and that's no good for no one. Whereas going to a group means you get, okay, maybe there's a way out of this, and there's some practical tools. That's what I'm trying to do on these lives, and you can go back through the lives, but I'm trying to give some practical steps that you can start now to get out of it, because that's what we need to do. We need to realise, okay, there's things I can do to get myself out of this. But equally, I think a huge part is just learning to love yourself, learning to give yourself grace, learning to give others grace, learning that, okay, humanity can be safe, life can be safe without the drugs or the alcohol or whatever it is. Right. So I'm a clusterfuck of addictions, but I've got clarity now and understand where I need help now. So it's that active addiction. I'm starting a free group, which is starting very soon, like in the next couple of weeks, if you want to join that. It's a different approach to AA and SMART, so anyone's welcome. Just go on my website that Tico's pinned. Ziggy's saying everyone's recovery is different and everyone should be allowed to share their opinion of their experience. Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't just addiction, this is mental health. If there was a one fix for something, then it would be one thing, but it's not. One shoe doesn't fit all. And this is why there's so many different types of therapists, there's so many different self-help books, there's so many different types of addiction support, because it isn't just one thing works for one person and then it's automatically going to work for the other person. What I will say is universal in healing addiction and is universal in sustainable recovery and mental health, regardless, is learning to find peace within yourself. That is universal. Learning to just feel comfortable in your own skin. And I would say what it is a process of is doing whatever it takes for you as an individual to feel comfortable in your own skin. And that's like looking at, okay, how does my mind work? Am I looking after my body? What's my environment like? Have I got a bunch of dickheads in my life? Do I have like supportive people, or actually are the people in my life tearing us down? Do I enjoy my job? Am I getting a good night's sleep? Stuff like that. Lucas is saying it's not a disease, it's a lack of willpower, just a pathetic excuse. So addiction isn't classed as a disease. There is a model that argues it is, but actually a more accurate description, I would say, is that it's a disorder. So because what happens is when you have an addiction, it changes your brain chemistry. So it's actually registered in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic something material. It's basically a diagnostic tool that psychiatrists and psychologists use to diagnose things like autism, ADHD, BPD, and alcohol use disorder or drug use disorder. So it changes the chemistry of your brain, and often what they find is that it is a result of something else going on underneath. It's a form of self-medication. So it's not a pathetic excuse, Lucas. I would say that actually that's just a misunderstanding, and it's a common misunderstanding as well, that that there's just an excuse, using addiction for an excuse. It's not. It's really difficult with addiction, because not only does it change you on your brain chemistry, but also it's usually used as a crutch for us to deal with something else going on underneath. So it's important that we understand that, like, all the research says that addiction doesn't happen out of a vacuum. It's not somebody just doing it for the sake of doing it. Actually, if you've got an addiction, there's likely an undiagnosed mental health disorder and or some kind of childhood trauma, maybe bullying, something. There's usually something that's went on underneath. So yeah. But I can understand why you think that. It's a common misconception, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this channel, to try and break that down. An excuse is an excuse. If you want to stop anything, you can. Blaming anything other than yourself is an excuse. Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to frame it in a way of, we do have the power to change. We absolutely do. But I think it's important that we don't simplify it as enough as, well, I should be able to stop. Because then what happens is we get a shame response when we're not able to stop. And then that actually then can make it worse, because we're like, well, why can't I stop when I should just be able to stop? It's up to me. And actually that's maybe not the case. You've got to think, okay, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff here. And actually this is where just learning about it can be really helpful. Learning about what's going on in my brain, like the neuroscience of addiction. Learning about, okay, why does addiction occur on a broad scale? And then learning about how does that apply to me? And then learning about, okay, what can I do differently to what I'm doing now to get out of it? And a lot of that is learning to love yourself. So it's not just, I think there's this really dangerous view of addiction where I just stop and it's up to you. Because realistically, a lot of people have probably sat there, myself included. Well, and now bear in mind, I was training to be an addictions therapist. So then when I was thinking, whoa, hang on a minute, like all the stuff I've learned isn't working. Why am I still an addict? And it wasn't for want of trying. It wasn't for want of trying to stop. It was just, I didn't understand enough at that point. And I think that's the important difference. It's about, okay, it's a journey to recovery, but it's not as simple as not stopping. Let's work out why, and let's create a plan, just step by step, habit by habit, to getting myself into a place where removing addiction is going to be, one, doable, and two, sustainable. James is saying education. Yeah, so basically I've studied addiction right up to PhD level, and I've studied mental health and counselling. So I've got 2 degrees in counselling, and I specialise in addiction. So, and I was like doing it to my PhD level. So I'm just trying to teach, and I've got overcame addiction myself. So I'm just trying to just give a little bit of psychoeducation, just debunk some of the myths around addiction that might be holding us back, and also just addressing mental health if anybody's got any questions about mental health as well, because let's be real, the addiction and mental health go hand in hand. And let's see what other people say. Common sense. It will always be a band-aid fix if you try to fix what is externally, internally. The society is broke and corrupt. That's not internal, and it's most people's problems. The society is the issue. Yeah, look, I fully agree with this. Society is in a shambles. But what we can do, so there's a really great podcast that I watched with somebody, it was on Dr. Chatterjee, and it was somebody who was locked up in Auschwitz. She was a young girl and she was a prisoner of war. And what she did is she pretended that she was a princess she was a princess and this was her palace, and she pretended that all the guards were her servants. And what she was talking about after was she got through living in Auschwitz, and she said it's all about how we choose to look at things. And I've got to say, you know, we're not living in Auschwitz. Let's be real. Like, society's a shambles, but we're not living in Auschwitz. We're not prisoners of war. But there is a lot of rubbish going on in the world, and it is awful, but we can choose how we look at it. So personally, I do not watch news. Like, I do not watch it. I do not follow it because I find it it elicits fear. I know that when we activate our fear response, we're pumping cortisol around our bodies, adrenaline, noradrenaline. This isn't a good feeling for my body. So I just refuse. Like that woman, I just refuse to accept that reality. And we can all choose to, you know, focus on the positive or focus on the negative. And that will be super helpful in addiction recovery and mental health, is if we learn to focus on the positive things in life and what we are in control of. Right. I mean, you're saying it's so easy, so do it. Show millions of addicts how easy it really is, like you claim. Well, look, I have done it. I have overcame addiction. So I'm not trying to say it's easy though. If you watch my channel, that is, and I don't want you sitting here thinking that I'm saying addiction is easy. One of the things that I regularly say is that addiction is really fucking hard. And I don't want to sit there and say anything different, because I don't want people sat there thinking, well, if she's found it easy and they've found it easy, then I'm the one who won't be able to do it because I'm finding it fucking solid. Like, this is brutal. Like, no, I found it brutal. It was hard, but it is doable. And actually, the brutal feeling of it is the initial part. If you can get past the first 3 months, you'll start to find it's easier. And actually, I would argue, providing that you're building up your life as well. So we don't just remove the addiction, we improve quality of life, we improve the relationship we have with ourselves. If you're doing that after 3 months, life will start to get a lot more sparkly. However, this is where I'd argue, this is where you start to get cocky, and you're likely to relapse off just being cocky. Oh, well, I'm actually doing well, so I can just have the drink. I can just do the gambling and stop. I can just take the drugs. So yeah, it's not easy, but it gets easier. And especially if you're recognizing it's not just removing the addiction, it's learning to love myself. Sounds so woo-woo, but it's so true. Love myself, and by giving myself grace, and also creating a life that is better than the life that I had with addiction. And if anyone's wanting some support on how to do that, get in touch with Tico's pinned my website. Right, I'm just going to scroll around because there's a lot of comments, so sorry if I'm missing them. If anyone, if I miss any of your comments, just send it on my website. It's all confidential. I will reply. Right, Novi, but isn't refusing the reality basically rejecting reality itself? It's important to be aware of the bad stuff so we can know how to deal with it, since the bad might affect your self-addiction too. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. what I'm going to back to you though is, yeah, we don't want to be rejecting full reality. You know, as somebody who's had psychosis and has been in a complete reality reject, like, I'm not saying that, but I'm not even saying you need to do what I'm saying and not watch the news. Like, I'm just saying that's what I do. You know, you don't have to do what I do. But it's about sitting there and thinking, okay, whatever it is that I'm having anxiety and stress over, if that is something that is out of my, like, categorically out of my control, is that worth it? So, for example, well, I remember with COVID, this was the first time I'd watched the news. I watched COVID, like, when it was bringing out releases every day. And I just started noticing that I was just getting more and more terrified. Every time I watched it, I was getting anxious before the news came on. And I thought, this isn't helping. Like, all I need to know is that, okay, there's COVID about and I need to protect myself. Watching the deaths rising and all this stuff is not helpful. And I'm not able to control anything. What I'm able to control is myself. And it's the same with other news. Like, is it really helping me know what's going on in other countries and that I've got no, like, potential third world war? Is that helpful to me? No, it's just terrifying. Can I do anything personally to stop it? No, it's just terrifying. And actually, me being as grounded and as calm as possible is going to be more helpful than me being dysregulated. So it's about knowing what's regulating to you and what's dysregulating. And that's up to you to decide. Yeah. Muffle Moose, I've never thought about stopping weed. It's never been a problem for me. I ain't greedy. Maybe spend 180 a month on it. Look, Muffle Moose, at the end of the day, like, if you want to smoke weed, you, like, I'm not here to sit here and tell you not to do it. Like, I'm talking about, like, addiction. And, you know, if you do it and it's not a problem, it's not even classed as an addiction. Addiction's something that's problematic and you're wanting to stop it and you can't. So yeah, that, like, there's people who have drinks of alcohol, and I would argue that's just as like, if you're looking at it on the impact of it, alcohol is just as bad. I'm not going to sit here and tell someone not to have a drink. So yeah. Let's say Quality Replica is saying using initially is a choice, yes, but not like a conscious choice where you know the potential risk and consequences, but just a choice to cope with whatever you're dealing with. Yeah. And I would argue that actually, is it really that much of a choice? Because often the majority of people who struggle with addiction, I would say a high percentage, a very, very high percentage of us started that when we were younger. So a lot of the time we start to explore alcohol, drugs, or gambling, or porn, or whatever it is that we become addicted to before the age of 25. I think that's a fair judgment to say that. I don't know, I haven't seen research on it, but I would imagine the majority of people start their addiction before the age of 25. Your frontal lobe isn't fully developed. That's the part of your brain which is responsible for conscious thinking, impulse control. So I don't even think you could fully class it as a conscious choice. It's just something that we're doing because our friends are doing, or we've stumbled across porn, or whatever it is. You know, I don't think it's ever really just, it's not somebody sitting down and going, right, I'm looking at my life and I think something's missing. I just feel like my life's just not right now. I think what I'm going to do, yeah, that's it. I think I'm going to go and see where the local dealers are, and I might start with cocaine, say I'll get along with that. And if that doesn't work out, I'll go on to crack or heroin, you know. Or yeah, there's always fentanyl. I've heard that's even worse. I think I'll just have a bit of an addiction and see how I deal with that. That sounds like something that I'm going to do. Like, come on, get real. No, nobody goes into addiction thinking I'm going to have an addiction. Nobody takes that thing and thinks I'm going to be addicted. And if they do think, oh, there's a high chance I'm going to be addicted, they're probably not thinking straight. Let's be real. So yeah, I don't think it's ever a choice. I don't think anyone's choosing to having it like, sign me up. Where do I go? That sounds like fun, or my life's a bit like pleasant now. Let's just mix things up, have a bit of addiction. So I just think the whole choice thing's a bit of a lot of bollocks, to be honest. Yeah. Right, let's see what else people are saying. I'm going to scroll around in the middle and just see about trying to get everyone a chance. Had people put me down lately because of my low mood, questioning how it is? It is possible. When the drugs have left my system, they seem to forget, just because my urines are clean, that there are still withdrawals. I'm sorry to hear that, Daniel Gannon. How are you doing, by the way, Daniel? It's nice to see you on the channel again. The thing is, low mood is going to take... I mean, how long have you been sober for? Because it's been quite some while. So it can take up to 3 months, I would say, before you start to feel a little bit more yourself. But I feel like you've been doing that for more than 3 months, or coming up to 3 months, because you were one of my first people on my channel. If you want to have a one-to-one, Daniel Gannon, we can. But yeah, and also I'm starting my group soon. But yeah, the thing is, yeah, addiction, when we remove so addiction, again, Daniel is talking about the fact that just because he's sober doesn't mean that he's in a good headspace. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. Just because we're sober doesn't mean that life's going to miraculously feel better. And this is where I think, the research is different, but it varies. But the highest percentage that research says is that up to 85% of people relapse in their first year of addiction recovery. This is really important information, because what it's shown us is that just because you stop doesn't mean that you're going to continue. And it's really important to make sure that you're in that 25% or more of people who don't stop, who do continue addiction recovery. And the reason why that percentage, I believe, is low is because it's not just about removing the addiction. So if we're struggling with low mood, we need to really think about, okay, I've got to work on that as well. I've got to work on improving my quality of life physically. So that's doing things which are, bringing joy to my life. I need to work on my self-talk. Like, are you having negative self-talk? I need to work on my relationships, making them more rich, maybe like putting in boundaries with them, maybe even getting brand new relationships and trying to find relationships with people who are aligning with this new version of ourselves. So it's really important that we don't just stop the addiction, but we start to rewire our brain and create a life of somebody who is, to be quite frank, completely different. Because the person who was struggling with addiction is somebody who needed addiction to live to get through the day. So you need to create a new life that you don't feel like you have to get through the day with addiction. You can get through because you enjoy it, you look forward to it. Right, quality replica. It rewires your brain. Think of it just stopping your favourite activity. Whatever makes you feel the absolute best, that is what it feels like, because the drugs become priority number one. Yeah, exactly. So don't just think about getting rid of it. Think about, okay, what is going to be something else I can do which is going to bring us joy. And bear in mind, your brain is not going to have the capacity to have joy, to be able to experience joy for the first 3 weeks. So it's really important in that first 3 weeks, when your brains are starting to rewire, because your dopamine receptors are going to be fucked. So it's really important that first 3 weeks that you accept, life is going to be grim. So I need to make myself comfortable. I need to keep myself accountable. So have some people who know what I'm doing. And